This week, the first week of February, is traditionally a period of retreat. It's a period of Sesshin. It's called Nehan Sesshin. Nehan refers to the Buddha's death. So we mark the Buddha's enlightenment on December 8th with Rohatsu Sesshin, which goes from the 1st to the 8th, and then his passing on February 8th with this Sesshin that again goes for that whole first week. In temples across Japan, whether they hold that retreat or not, there's a painting that they roll out. Most temples would own some version of this, sometimes new, sometimes ancient. And they'll preserve it and keep it in a special place all year. And then they'll take it out for this week or maybe for a couple weeks. It's the Nehane. It's the Nehan painting. And it's always the same scene, though, in variations, of the Buddha lying on his side in repose. And then all around are the Buddha's disciples, but also animals. Lots and lots of animals. The natural world comes together and surrounds the Buddha in this final moment. It's very colorful and lovely and kind of cartoony at the same time. It's fantastical. So everywhere you go during this period, you get to see these wonderful depictions of this moment, this very crowded hospital room, essentially. Everyone is gathered around the Buddha, except it's beneath a tree. So I've been thinking the last few days what to say about it. You know, there's a version of this story in which the Buddha is superhuman. And then he passes into some sort of nirvana. We say the earth shook. A super being passes away. But if we don't tell the story that way, then we're just left with the story of this man who was quite old, older than his peers, who got sick, painfully sick from something he ate, and passed away. What does it mean? There's a level on which this story isn't very interesting. Everybody dies. But just to back up a little bit, you know, in Japan I've attended a lot of funerals. A lot. I would help my teacher perform funerals. I would help other teachers perform funerals. I spent a lot of time in that space. And I've attended a few funerals here, but not as many. And I have a really simple observation about the difference, which is that funerals here, by and large, seem to be for the people who attend. And what I mean by that is that the priest or whoever is officiating tends to turn toward the people in attendance. They might do readings in that direction. They'll offer words of comfort for those people who came. If someone stands up and speaks about the dead, they tell the story to an audience. There are rites, there's an element of ceremony that's for the deceased, but really, the way that the funeral is framed, it's for the people who are there, who have come, who want some sort of comfort, who want to maybe remember something in particular. Well, in Japan, at least in Zen ceremonies, but I think this is fairly typical across traditions, it's quite different. The priest faces the altar away from everyone. And the ceremony itself is an ordination for the person who has passed away. The people in attendance are not spoken to. They're not there to be comforted. They're there to witness this ordination and to kind of lend their own spiritual power to what's happening. And when people do stand up, family members or dear friends of the person who passed away, and when they speak, they also speak to the person. They address the person directly. They say, "Do you remember that time?" It's a very different feeling. I can't say I have a preference for one or the other, but it brings to mind for me how we have options about how we relate to death. What might seem obvious is not necessarily the only way. And that this is always relevant now. When the Buddha was dying, and again he knew he was dying because he essentially had food poisoning. The monks who were around him recognized what was happening. They saw that this was the end, and they started to become overwhelmed, not just with grief, but with the anxiety of losing their teacher. They started to see what was going to happen next, that today or tomorrow or the next day, that the Buddha would be gone. And then they would be left alone. They had dedicated everything to following this person, to following not just this person's teachings, but this person. And they said, "What are we going to do? We're going to be without a teacher. Tell us what to do." And the Buddha basically said, "I don't have to. You don't need me." He said, "Be a light unto yourselves." What he did in that simple statement, in that simple moment, was to free them. They felt all this pressure. They felt all these expectations. In many cases, they felt they had not measured up. They needed more time. They needed more instruction. They needed more guidance. And he saw all that. And he said, "Let go of all of that. You can do this. Don't carry me after I'm gone." The way I see it, all of us, our entire lives, are always occupying two roles in relationship to death. We are the person who is dying, because we are. And we are the person who is with the person who is dying. Because again, we always, always are. There's no exception. What do we do in these two roles? How do we occupy the role of someone who is passing away? And how do we occupy the role of the person at the bedside? The person who sees, just as the Buddha's disciples saw, what is inevitable. First, to occupy either role, we have to recognize it. We have to recognize what is inevitable. We have to recognize that no one escapes this. That everyone is moving toward this. Everyone. The people closest to you, the people you pass on the street. This is constant. And then we ask ourselves how best to fulfill that role. When we look at those paintings, all the animals of the world, it's kind of the Noah's Ark equivalent. All the animals gathered, the natural world gathered, the disciples gathered, leaders gathered, they all came and stood around and knelt around where the Buddha was dying. Why? They came to say thank you. That's what you do. They came to say the thing that they needed to say. Yesterday, 2 days ago, there was a big ceremony at Berkeley Zen Center, and Hozan Senaki became the new abbot. I spoke a couple weeks ago about Sojun Weitzman, who had just passed away. He was the previous abbot. So this is a big ceremony for a huge community, and it was a wonderful event. It was online because of the world that we're living in, but 350 plus people were witnessing this. And the ceremony began with someone on the board of directors of the Berkeley Zen Center reading a kind of invitation to Hozan. And in that invitation, there was this expression of gratitude, this beautiful statement of saying, we recognize all that you've done. We recognize all that you're doing, and we have complete trust in you. Complete. And then Hozan went into the Dharma hall, and he went around to the different statues and the different paintings, and he said thank you. He said thank you to the Buddha. He said thank you to Mahapajapati, the Buddha's mother and the first nun. He said thank you to the Bodhisattvas. He said thank you to his teacher's teacher. And he said thank you to his own teacher. Just as a matter of course, to step into that role, he understood that he needed to go around and express that gratitude. It's never too late. And we do it in the ceremony to people we've never met. There are people in your life who need to hear that expression of gratitude. And perhaps even more, there are people in your life around which you feel a gap because you haven't said it. You've let it be assumed. Or you've thought, well, someday. But the opportunity is now. Because we never know when the next opportunity will be. We can be having coffee with a friend, and we can pause and we can say, I want to thank you. Not just for coming here today, not for small things, but for all of it. I want to thank you for all of it. That's what it is to be at the bedside. That's what it was for all those beings gathered around the Buddha. So there's that role. And then there's this other role of the one who is dying. I spoke a couple weeks ago, some of you were there, I spoke to the SCBA, and I talked at length about all the things that we hold on to, the ideas and the beliefs that we insist on holding, that we think make us who we are. And I said, you have to let those go. But what I failed to say in that talk, and should have, especially because there were a lot of teachers listening to that talk, is that there's another side, which is that we ask people to hold things. It's not just what we're carrying and what we can drop. We place expectations on others. Maybe that comes in the form of pressure. Maybe that comes in the feeling of guilt. Even in our most loving relationships, we allow people to feel a sense of what we want or what we expect. We have to be conscious of that. We have to be conscious of the fact that we may not even know what that is. We may not know what someone is holding in relationship to us. And so we must take the opportunity to let them go, to free them, to say, as the Buddha said, be a light unto yourselves. We don't have to be on our deathbed to do this. I don't think we always even need to say it, because it may not be understood. But we can feel it. And in feeling it, I think we can let it be felt. That the person across from us is liberated from us. We don't need them to be a particular way. We don't need them to follow a particular path. We don't need them to always remember whatever that is. We can release our grasp. And in doing so, release them. This is something we should do before we die. And because we don't know when we're going to die, it's something we should do now. So as we approach this day, this arbitrary day, because of course the Buddha didn't die on February 8th, who knows? This is what I'm left thinking about. That there are these two modes, these two attitudes we can take in relationship to impermanence, to seeing impermanence with open eyes. One is that we are always in a position to express gratitude. And two is that we are always in a position to liberate others. We breathe in and do one, and we breathe out and do the other. And we breathe in and we breathe out. And we do this knowing that one day we or the person we're with just breathes out. And I'll stop there.